There's something deeply familiar at the heart of the substance. Beneath its striking visuals and unsettling tone lies a story about identity, control, and the human desire to become something better. It's a theme that immediately calls to mind the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a classic exploration of duality that still feels relevant today. The substance follows a woman whose life has been shaped by expectations around youth, beauty, and relevance. When she's offered access to a mysterious product, the substance, it promises something extraordinary, a chance to create a younger, more perfect version of herself. But this isn't just a transformation in the usual sense. Instead, the substance splits her existence into two distinct selves, each taking turns living in the world. At first, the arrangement seems like a solution. The younger version embodies everything she feels she's lost: confidence, desirability, control. But the balance between the two selves quickly begin to break down. Time, identity, and ownership of the body becomes contested. What begins as an opportunity turns into a struggle for dominance as the boundaries between the two versions blur in disturbing ways. The film leans heavily into body horror to show this unraveling, making the experience as physical as it is psychological. This idea of dividing the self is, of course, not new. In The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Henry Jekyll is driven by a different but related desire to separate the good and evil within him. Through a scientific experiment, he creates a potion that allows him to transform into Mr. Edward Hyde, a figure who embodies his darker impulses. At first, Jekyll believes he's in control. Hyde is smaller, freer, unburdened by morality, able to act without consequence, but that freedom quickly turns dangerous. Hyde becomes increasingly violent, committing acts that Jekyll cannot ignore or undo. Over time, the transformations begin to happen without the potion, and Jekyll loses the ability to separate himself from the monster he created. The story unfolds as a slow, chilling realization that the two identities are not truly separate. Hyde is not an external force, but a part of Jekyll himself. Both these works hinge on the same central idea. The self is not singular. In the substance, that duality is expressed through youth versus age, perfection versus decay, control versus insecurity. In Stevenson's novel, it's framed as morality versus immorality, civility versus savagery. Despite these different lenses, both stories ask similar questions. What happens when we try to isolate parts of ourselves we don't want to face? And can we ever truly control what we create? The similarities are clear in structure as well. Both narratives begin with a sense of possibility, a breakthrough that promises freedom or improvement. Both then descend into loss of control as the other self grows stronger and more independent. In both these cases, the experiment ultimately exposes something uncomfortable, that the division was never clean to begin with. Where they differ most is in tone and method. In Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde relies on restraint. Much of its horror is implied rather than shown, unfolding through letters, testimonies, and gradual revelation. It trusts its reader to imagine the worst. The substance, on the other hand, is immediate and explicit. Its horror is visual, physical, and often overwhelming. It doesn't suggest transformation. It shows it in detail, forcing the audience to confront it directly. There's also a shift in what each story is critiquing. Stevenson's work reflects anxieties about Victorian society, repression, respectability, and the fear of a hidden vice. The substance feels rooted in contemporary pressures, aging, visibility, and the relentless demand to remain desirable. Where Jekyll wants to escape moral constraints, Elizabeth Sparkle is trying to escape irrelevance. That difference affects how each story handles responsibility. Jekyll is acutely aware of his actions and their consequences, even as he fails to stop them. His story carries a strong sense of guilt and moral reckoning. In the substance, the emotional core is less about guilt and more about desperation, the fear of losing oneself in a world that values appearance above all else. The result is a narrative that feels more chaotic, but also more reflective of modern anxieties. In the end, the substance does not replace Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It reframes it. It takes the same fundamental idea of a divided self and pushes it into a louder, more visceral space. Whether that approach works depends on what you value, but if you are drawn to subtle psychological horror, Stevenson's novel remains unmatched. But if you are interested in a bold, unsettling reinterpretation of the same themes, the substance offers a version that feels distinctly of its time.